Notice the changes in her life until she's in a completely different environment. I'm Henry, but you can call me Hank. I'm a farmer. Not one of those artisanal farmers that has 6 acres and grow organic hemp. I'm working the same land that my father worked, and his father too. I'm not rich. I just have a lot of land along a tiny state road that's been widened. The state took a 2-mile strip of it in for eminent domain. When I got the notice, I took the case to my father's old lawyer, Ben Platter. He looked over the paperwork and said we could sue the state, but the best we could probably get is a better offer. You can't fight City Hall and win, especially in a case like this. 3 months later, the offer for the land was significantly better. I agreed, even though I didn't really want to. A year later, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, there was this sharp-looking woman in a business suit. Red hair, flashed a smile, and pressed a business card to the screen door. "My name is Jessica Laws. I'm a realtor. I wanted to come in and talk to you about your property." I was hesitant, but she seemed harmless. If I didn't sign anything, she couldn't just take away my family's land. I opened the door and she came in. She shook my hand. She was probably about 30. She had an electric smile, but there was something about her eyes that spoke of something darker. Maybe a loss. Maybe a massive mistake. I took her to the kitchen table and offered her coffee. She nodded. "Yes, please, cream and sugar." I gave her the coffee and she sat down. "I assume you understand, in part, why I'm here. I represent Hambert, Rendricks, and Laws Realty. We're scouting for good land for possible developments, and your land, or at least parts of it, represent a possible opportunity. I've pulled up your property from the county, and it looks like you own 316 acres of land." I nodded. "Until a couple years ago, I had about 320 even. But the state took land along the highway, and that cut into my stake." She nodded. "I see. Now about 5 years ago, the county assessed the property at $7.1 million. I nodded. "It's been a huge tax burden, no doubt." "I understand," she admitted. She pulled out a map that looked like it represented about 10 square miles, with my land situated on it. "Now your property is here," she noted. "That part of the land near the corner of the State Highway and County Road 212 would be excellent for development. We're thinking housing, commercial development, maybe some office space. It could take years, but I've been sent to gauge your willingness to sell, perhaps 50 acres nearest to that corner." 50 acres. That would be 1/6 of my property. "Gosh, Miss Laws, that sounds like a huge chunk of my farmland. That's wheat and soybeans I'll never be able to grow again. And the land has been in my family's name for almost a century." She nodded, taking on a serious face. "We know what it's like to deal with family land. We take family claims seriously, but we're willing to make a serious offer, and I promise you that the amount will more than make up for the lost crops." I wondered at this Miss Laws. She was implying that the money would be tempting enough to sell away. I looked out the window. 50 acres, 1/6 of my property. The county thinks the farmland is worth $7.1 million. I wondered if she would offer me $1 million and be done with it. I'd probably say no. I decided to make her see how I felt about my land. "Are you afraid to get your shoes dirty, Miss Laws? Call me Jessica, and I'm not worried to dirty up these flats." She showed off her plain black shoes. I nodded. "Come on outside and let me show you my farm." She stood up, leaving her maps and her briefcase at the table, and followed me out the door. I breathed in the sweet air of wheat. From my porch, it looked like a bright golden sea, not yet ready to be harvested, but looking like a good year. Jessica stepped out next to me, and at that moment her perspective changed. She took a deep breath, smiled, and stepped off the porch before me. I led her towards the barn. Not much to it at the moment. I kept the tractor there, but the harvester was in storage. This barn was built in 1955 by my great-grandfather. It replaced a much older barn, but it's in good shape. I took her down some of the paths, pointing out wheat, some hay I was raising. When we got further down, she took a deep breath, opened her eyes, and said, "Barley? Very good, Jessica. I'm impressed," I remarked. She nodded. "My mother's parents had a tiny little farm. They told me that the family had been sharecroppers. Grandma and Grandpa had done better by building a little restaurant where travelers could eat. But they kept that farm going until my grandmother died." She smiled. "They grew barley for beer." I nodded. appreciative of her knowledge. That's wonderful. Jessica, I have a client who owns a specialty bakery who has me grow a few acres of barley for her. Jessica looked around. It feels like I've stepped back into my childhood all over again. She looked at me and smiled. We're not anywhere that corner now, are we? I shook my head. Good. Don't sell this parcel. It's too perfect, I chuckled. So, Jessica Laws, throw me an idea that your real estate company thinks it's worth to buy that land near the state road. She was still smiling, but when she took in the actual question, she got a little more serious. Oh, well, the company doesn't have hard numbers yet, but I have to think that they'd offer something like 5 million cash and then 2% of revenues from resale and development. I see. 5 million. It was far bigger than I had hoped for, and 2% of revenues, maybe another million when all was said and done. And I still had the rest of my land. It was hard to say losing 1/6 of your property meant revenue would drop, but it was an interesting idea. Jessica had that charmed smile on her face again, but then she walked down the path by herself, maybe 100 yards. When she walked back, her face had changed. Her voice was softer. She ran her hand through her hair. I just started with my uncle's realty company, and you're literally my first potential client. I hope it doesn't come off as weird that I'm really enjoying this visit. I raised an eyebrow. You wouldn't put me on, giving me the big eyes, just to try to make the sale, would you? Her face turned red. Then it changed into a major frown. I spent 10 years of my life taking advantage of people. I used a few boyfriends up. I even had a very well-to-do boyfriend. And then he found out I was going to cheat on him on a girl's trip that he was going to cover for me. When he saw the texts on my iPad, there was a huge argument, and he dumped me on the spot. She sighed. I lost everything and struggled for 2 years. Finally, an uncle paid for me to get real estate training so I could work for his company. She paused for a long time. If you were to ask me out, I would turn the account over and trade for some other prospects. I'd rather you not think I'm using you. I nodded. I appreciate that, Jessica. Why don't we put some time and thought into the matter? I'd hate for you to lose out on what might be a large first sale if you're not truly willing to make the sacrifice. I look out over the land. The land never goes away. You can build a massive office building over it, but it's still there. She smiled. I guess you're right, Hank. On both counts. It's a huge decision, and the land will still be there. We shook hands. I led her back into the house and gathered her things, and then watched as she drove off. That afternoon, I called Ben Platter again. He suggested that I come in and we discuss the sale. When I went in, I showed him Jessica's card. We discussed the assessed value of the land, the parcel that the company wanted to buy, and the figure that she had thrown out. When I stated that she had mentioned 5 million with a 2% revenue deal, he nodded. Standard boilerplate opening offer. If you were fool enough to accept it, you'd still do okay. But I'd say they're ready to get that number up to 7 million or so, and they can well afford to bring that revenue percentage up, maybe up to 5%. He suggested that we bring in a colleague who specialized in real estate contracts. He'd be able to negotiate a deal that would make me far more comfortable. I was thinking about Jessica, how at ease she seemed as we walked through the farm. When an email came in on my computer, I was hopeful, but that was dashed when I read her message. I was impressed with you as a farmer and as a man, but I have to think about my career with my uncle's company, so I've decided to continue this on a professional level. Thank you for the courtesy letting me think about my future. I assure you that I will treat you fairly and do my best to get you the best possible deal from the company. Sincerely, Jessica Laws. I took a deep breath, nodded, and wrote back a professional and appreciative return. Though I was disappointed, really there was nothing than a gentle flirtation. She liked the farm, and there was a moment of personal connection. But she chose to have a realtor-client relationship, and I had to respect that. Perhaps it was for the best. Over the next month or so, she knocked on my door a few more times. Other representatives from the company sometimes came with her. At first, she was professional and cheerful, but as time went by, she seemed quieter. Every time she asked to walk the fields, and when she would come back, there was a look of distress in her eyes. But she always gave me a smile that never reached her eyes, and she would thank me for working with her. Eventually, negotiations got serious. A new face showed up, a man with a sharp tan suit and a purple pocket square. with flecks of charcoal in his neatly cropped hair, and a lighter step than I expected from a man his age. He introduced himself as Darius Green. I assumed he was one of the lawyers. After 2 days of negotiations with Ben Platter and his colleague, we shook hands with the company. $6.9 million dollars and 4.75% in future revenues. I was invited to the offices of Hambert, Rendricks, and Laws for the final signatures. There would be Ben, my lawyer, a notary public, and even the company partners would be there. Once the signatures were made and the ink was drying on the page, I looked around. Everyone who had worked on this negotiation had been assembled, but I didn't see Jessica. I looked around and casually asked where Miss Laws was. Her uncle, one of the partners, spoke up. My niece decided about a month into the process that she didn't feel comfortable continuing on this account. There was a sharpness in his voice. It was a very annoying situation, but Mr. Green, he gestured to the man I had met, agreed to trade one of his progressing accounts to her. Jessica is handling that sale professionally. He paused. Irregular but sufficient. Mr. Green heard his name and came over. The account I gave her was about 80% as valuable as this deal. It was one of my smaller deals, but she agreed to take the hit. He offered me his hand. I didn't mind the trade. I nodded and didn't think much of it at the time, but when I got home, something left me unsettled. Why had she walked away from the sale? It left me dissatisfied. I tracked down the email she had sent me and sent a message. The sale of the 48 acres officially closed today, but I noticed you weren't part of the process. Your uncle informed me that you removed yourself from the sale to take on a smaller account. May I ask what made you step back? Several days passed. A sign was put up, coming soon, Rutland Estates Developments, commercial and residential subdivisions. But no return came from Jessica. Finally, on Saturday morning, there was an email from her. I opened and read it. Hank, it was true that I initially decided to continue handling your account, and I expected our good rapport would provide a clean sale without any drama. But every time I went out there to represent the company, the peace of your farm and the way you carried yourself made me more and more unsure I wanted to be on the business side of things. The last time I nearly broke down in front of you, but I thought that might look like manipulation. So I went back and asked to be taken off the sale of your property. That irritated my uncle greatly, but Mr. Green stepped in and offered to trade one of his accounts to take over this sale. That satisfied my uncle, and I will soon be closing on a commercial property on the other side of town. In the end, it just felt too much like all those men that I took advantage of when I was making bad decisions in the past. You meant too much, even if we never really had more than a moment together. Jessica, I read it over. Her words were heavy with regret, but they gave me the answer I needed. She hadn't done me any harm. In fact, she had taken a financial loss just to keep from compromising herself in front of me. I decided to ruminate on that for a day. I always made my best decisions when I was pulling weeds or laying down fertilizer. The farm seemed to know. The next evening, I wrote a response to her. Jessica, I appreciated your initial candor when you decided to keep things professional. But given the choice you ultimately made, I think it's only fair to offer you a chance to renew our personal acquaintance. I intend to build a fire in my backyard this Friday evening at 7 p.m. I'll have hot dogs for us to cook over the flames, and as the sun sets, we might roast some marshmallows and toast to new beginnings. It would be pleasant if you would join me. Hank. I didn't have to wait long for the response. Dear Hank, it would be a pleasure to join you for your backyard fire. I could bring graham crackers and chocolate for s'mores. Consider your invitation.